The DNA of some from southeast England raises questions as to their origins. We know that England was part of the Roman Empire at one point. The Romans may have given us impressive roads, plumbing, and the entirely new calendar, but it was always thought that when they left Britain, they took their DNA with them. Previous studies have shown that the legionnaires left little genetic legacy before returning to defend the Roman Empire from marauding barbarians in the 5th century, but new research could be about to prove otherwise. A recent study by Harvard University found a strange genetic disparity emerged in southeast England around the Iron Age and Roman period. At that time, most Britons were descended from the Beaker people, a group of farmers who migrated from the Central Europe around 2750 BC, and who replaced 90% of Britain's gene pool within just a few hundred years. Yet new studies of ancient skeletons show that people in the southeast were getting their DNA from elsewhere, and now researchers at Harvard are trying to find out from whom. So far, they have three theories. Either a small pocket of ancient Britons, such as those who built Stonehenge, survived and set up a last-ditch colony, holding out in isolation until they began mixing with groups in the southeast. Alternatively, an entirely different group may have migrated from Europe. But the third theory is the most controversial. The strange genetic disparity could prove for the first time that many of the Roman soldiers stayed in Britain after all, starting families and leaving a lasting legacy written in bone. Professor David Wright, a specialist in ancient DNA at Harvard, has begun sampling 1,000 new skeletons from the period to find out where the truth lies. Professor Wright said, "We see changed in ancestry in the southeast of Britain by the Roman period compared to 1,000 years before. This means that there must have been admixture into southeastern Britain in the Iron Age or the Roman period that did not affect the north to the same extent. However, we don't know the details of how this occurred, and several explanations are possible. We are just starting out on this project," he said. The migration of the Beaker people at the end of the Neolithic period, some 4,000 years ago, is generally considered to be one of the most significant events ever to shape Britain. Suddenly, graves contained stylized bell-shaped pots, copper daggers, arrowheads, stone wrist guards, and V-shaped buttons previously only seen in continental Europe. But at the same point around the Iron Age, around 800 BC, DNA evidence shows that groups in the southeast mixed with an entirely new population, possibly Romans, who occupied Britain from 43 AD to 410 AD. The migration of the Beaker people at the end of the Neolithic period, some 4,000 years ago, is generally considered to be one of the most significant events ever to shape Britain. Suddenly, graves contained stylized bell-shaped pots, copper daggers, arrowheads, stone wrist guards, and V-shaped buttons, previously only seen in continental Europe. But at some point around the Iron Age, around 800 BC, DNA evidence shows that groups in the southeast mixed with an entirely new population, possibly the Romans, who occupied Britain from 43 AD until 410 AD. Professor Mark Robinson of Oxford University School of Archaeology said, "Even if Roman veterans had stayed, they would have not been Italian. There has never been evidence for a significant presence of Romans from Italy in Britain other than during the initial 43 AD conquest," said Professor Robinson, who in 2015 published a groundbreaking study showing Britain is still genetically divided into Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. For most of the period of Roman Britain, there would only have been a few high-ranking officials from Italy. If their results are due to settlement in the Roman period, the most likely source would be legionary veterans who decided not to return home after their discharge. The largest group of them would probably have been recruits from the Rhineland, from Germany that is. Perhaps settling army veterans encouraged further migration to Rhineland and Gaul, which is today's France. Commenting on other theories, Professor Robinson said there was no evidence that Neolithic farming communities survived in Britain after the arrival of the Beaker people, although he said that a new migration from Europe was a possibility. We do not have good evidence for this from the material culture, but Caesar refers to the settlement of Belgae in this area of Britain in the mid-1st century BC, said Professor Robinson. These were a people who inhabited the area of Gaul, including what is now part of northeast France, Belgium, and the West Netherlands. A completely unknown migration is also possible. This is by Sarah Knapp from The Telegraph, and it's on Bended Reality. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.